Alright, I've been meaning to make this video for a little while. It's a wicked technique and I have been meaning to make it, but then recently on the EDM production subreddit there was a recent post about a zombie producer masterclass video in which he mentioned the same technique, so using a saturator where traditionally you might have used a compressor. So I read through the comments on that, and there seemed to be a little bit of a misunderstanding from some people about how those two processes are related. So I thought I'd put this video together to just demonstrate it really clearly, how those two things can be used. I've set this thing. I was going to do this as an actual real life mixdown, but I think I'll just do it on this because I found something which probably illustrates it a little bit better, just as a single drum loop. So I've got this drum loop here, which is from the Stereo MC's sample pack. The wicked breakbeat is full of, that sample pack's amazing, it's full of loads of really cool drum sounds, but at the minute it just sounds like this. Shit, wrong. So pretty laid back, very analog sort of, not analog, like live sort of acoustic drum set, drum kit sounding. Now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to drop onto here a little freeware plugin called Compressor. Now this is an oscilloscope which will show us what this wave, what this drum loop actually looks like. Okay, actually I'll just freeze it quickly. Okay, so this is what this drum loop looks like. Now this is characteristic of a lot of analog drums, is that you've got this huge dynamic range. So you've got, you know, most of the level is sort of around here, but you have these spikes. Now these spikes are really important for the sound and the feel. You know, the dynamic range and the attack of those drums is really, really important. But with a lot of modern music, there's a good chance that if you were using a sound like this, you'd want to bring that dynamic range in a little bit. You know, you'd want to be able to reduce these peaks so that you can turn the overall level up of the drums and get them sounding a bit louder in the mix. So this is a really classic use for compressor. So I'll set this up quickly using a compressor so you can see exactly how that will work. So I'll drop a compressor on here. I'll move the oscilloscope after the compressor so you can see what's happening. So you can see here that a lot of these peaks here, the Compressor has this metering function, so you can actually see where the level is. So I think around here, I think everything above that we could maybe lose, or at least reduce in volume. So that's minus 6.2 there. So I'm going to set this compressor up to do that. So I'll set the threshold to minus 6.2. We don't want anything below that really getting affected, because that's going to start crunching into the real sound of the rest of the drums. We'll have a nice high attack because we really want to clamp them down. Zero attack, or as quick as attack as possible. The release we'll leave like that. We might have to tweak that because we might get some real pumping sounds, but at the minute we'll just leave it at that, and I think it should be okay. And then the knee, we're going to take the knee right down because we don't want the compressor to come in gradually. We want it to just clamp down as soon as it gets there to really level these peaks out. So let's have a listen to that. I'll take the freeze off so you can see what's happening. So you can see there the levels, all those peaks that were above that 6.2 cutoff have now been compressed right down. I'll just cycle the compressor on and off so you can see that again. So that's with the compressor on and off. And on again. So it's relatively transparent. Like I said, that's a really classic use of a compressor. Now, what we're kind of wanting to do out of this is to be able to increase the level that we can actually play these drums back at in the mix. So this box here is the peaking level meter on the live channel. So I'll reset that, and we'll see the difference between the compressed signal and the uncompressed. So I'll turn the compressor off, and we'll just see where this is peaking. So it's minus 1.6 or thereabouts. So we'll turn the compressor on and see where we're at. So it's reduced the peaking level right down. So we're down at 5.8. Now, if we wanted to be back up, if we wanted to have this compressor peaking at around the same level, then we can increase the gain of the compressor, so we can fill up this headroom that we've just freed up by compressing the peaks. So to get it back up there, we can add maybe 4 dB. So I'll just type in 4 there. So 1.8. So that's there or thereabouts from where we were before this compressor. So I'll just do an A/B so you can see the difference. So this is compressor off and on. So what we've done there is we've just given it a lot higher sort of volume, I suppose, like the perceived level, like the RMS signal level is a lot higher from using this compressor. So like I said, that's a really classic use of a compressor. Make the average signal level higher so that you get a louder element in the mix. So all right, that's fairly straightforward. So next we're going to do exactly the same thing, except for we're going to use a saturator. So I'll drag this in. Now, I'm not going to go into too much detail about how this thing works, but for the purposes of this sort of example, the way to think of this processor is it takes the signal, and then what you can do is you can drive it with this this knob here. So you can drive the signal harder and harder and harder, and what it'll do is it'll boost the level until that level hits 0 dB, and this is the little level meter in the saturator, and this white line here represents 0 dB. So when the level hits above that, what it does is it just saturates it out, it just clips it, which is similar to the way that a lot of the old analog circuits used to work. When you drove them with a little bit too hot a signal, then it would just saturate it out, it would sort of square off the signal a little bit. Now, it doesn't do this. If you do this in the digital domain and you get digital clipping, that's bad. You don't want that at all. But this is a processor which models the old analog stuff, so it does it in an analog way. You get an analog kind of distortion feel. Now, the thing about the saturator is that if it's acting over very, very short times, like on the peaks of this drum loop, then you don't actually get that distortion sound. It acts in a very similar way to the compressor, because what you're doing is those peaks are getting boosted until they hit 0 dB, and then everything above that is getting sheared off. So what we'll do is we'll look at it in the oscilloscope, and then I'll show you how it works. I'll just stop talking and do it. Whoa, so what are we on here? So we'll turn this off. So we'll use the same settings as we use for the compressor. So we reckon that 6.2 is about the level which we want to be the highest part of the signal. So what we'll do is we'll boost the saturator by 6.2 decibels, and then we'll turn it down by the same amount, so minus 6.2 here on the output. Now what this is going to do is it's going to drive the signal so that everything up to 6.2 dB will get boosted up to 0 dB, and everything above that is just going to get sheared off, it's just going to get saturated out. And then we're going to reduce the gain by changing the output down by the same amount. And so what that will have done is it will have boosted it, sheared off the peaks, and then lowered the level down again. So the level should be the same, but those peaks that were there before will be gone, in the same way that the compressor did. So the compressor turned the volume down, whereas the saturator has just sheared them off. So we'll see what happens here. So I'll show you before the saturator, and then I'll turn it on. So you can see there's a straight line right at 6.2 which we sheared off, and nothing above that is coming through. Now, in the same way that we gave this an extra 4 dB of makeup gain in the compressor, we can do the same thing on the saturator. So I'll give that another 4 dB, 1, 2, 3, 4, and that will have level matched it back to the peaking signal that there was before we turned this processor on. So let's have a A/B of before and after. So this is before the saturator and after. So you can see the similarities here. Exactly, they're exactly analogous. What we've done, used the compressor to turn the peaks down, and then the saturator we've done the same, except for instead of turning them down, we've just sheared them off. Now, what I'll do is I'll just drag in an audio effect rack, create 2 chains, and then I'll put the compressor on one chain and the saturator on another. And then I'm just going to set this up so that we can quickly cycle between them. So I've just set this up as a chain, and I'll map that to the macro. So what this will do now is, I just need to change the range, so I'll set that to 1. So what this chain selector now will do, so this is the compressor, and this is the saturator. So we can swap between the two here quite easily, so we'll be able to see the difference in the sound. So here we go, here's the compressor and the saturator. Compressor and saturator. So there's a difference in flavour there, definitely. You know, the saturator, there's definitely that more sort of you know, distortion-y type feel. Now, you might want that. The idea of this is that it's an alternative to using a compressor, not a, you know, it's not a replacement, it's just an alternative. It has a different feel. Now, the saturator works really well on signals where you've got very, very short peaks, as I said before, so it'll just shear them off and you don't get that kind of, it doesn't character the sound too much. But it works, you can use this technique on any signal in which you've got a peak which you want to get rid of, you know, something that you might have used a compressor for in the past, you can actually just saturate it out. Now, you might want to use it in a place of compressor in times where, I mean, there's occasions where if you've got a very, very short peak that the compressor might not catch it in time. You know, it hasn't got a fast enough attack, the compressor you're using, the Ableton one's very, very fast as it happens, but you might be using a different one which can't quite catch the peaks in time, or because it's very short, sharp peaks, then the release is giving a pumping effect, which you don't want. The good thing about a saturator is you don't have that attack and release issue. It just, you know, anything that goes above, it just gets sheared off. So, I mean, it's a sense a little bit like a limiter, you know, like a compressor with an infinite attack. It just won't let anything through above that. Now, one thing that I found useful, which you might want to, you know, do the same of, is I've created an effect rack here, where I've dropped in a saturator. Actually, this is not the right one. Hang on a sec. Okay. So what I've done here is I've created an effect rack where I've mapped this macro here, the drive, to the drive of here, and then I've also inversely mapped it to the output, so that as I increase this macro knob, the drive increases and then the output decreases by an equivalent amount. Now what that does is it level matches it, basically. It means that the saturator isn't going to be increasing the level, it's just going to be shearing off the peaks basically, and then bringing the average volume up. So as you do that, you create headroom. The signal as it gets saturated out is going to take less and less headroom, so you're going to have space in which you can use this makeup gain. I've just put a utility on here and I've mapped the gain to a macro. So I'll show you how this actually works in practice. You can use your ears to set the right levels. So here's the drum beat again, and then I'm going to just increase this drive. And you'll see the peaks getting lower and lower. And it also gets more saturated, sounding more distorted. But then it means that you can use this makeup gain and you can increase the level back up to fill the headroom that you've saturated out using the saturator. You can increase this if you want. And it just gives you a much higher sort of perceived level if that's the sort of flavour that you're after. Again, compression often in this sense is used to increase the RMS, the perceived volume of a signal, and so this is basically just to try and demonstrate that you can use a saturator to do exactly the same thing. Okay, that's it. Hopefully somebody's found this useful.